Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. This is the final video for James the Clown, and in this video it kind of goes through the process of unwrapping and putting the scene into Marmoset Toolbag. So on the last video I left off doing the string for the clown balloon, and I used Z-spheres to create this. And a lot of it's just kind of pushing and pulling the little nodes around and just trying to get your look of what you want. Make a depth of skin, create a duplicate, and then you append it back into your main scene. And I guess they do this so that you don't really kind of lose that model, or even if you're just trying to... I kind of wouldn't mind if it would append into the same scene, but you get used to it. So right here I inflate it, just kind of squeeze it a little bit just to give a little stringiness, and I kind of smooth it out on the edges just to break some of these hard edges. Didn't really plan on you being close up to the string, and like I said, this whole process and the whole model was just to kind of put a short deadline mentally on myself to get it done. So that's what I'm doing here, just kind of modifying the string real quick, just smoothing it out and getting a little bit thinner lines and going from here and there. I'm okay if it's not too perfect, I'm just trying to get it finished. So you can see it just needs a little adjustments on the string, just kind of fine tuning it here and there, making it not so perfect and skinny it up. So the balloon, name your items. Always best. I learned if you're gonna not name your items and then you try to jump into another program like Marmoset or anything like that, it becomes a little more difficult to pinpoint what you're clicking on and what item you're using. So, and every now and then I'll forget to name something, and then when I get a Marmoset I'm like, oh, what am I clicking on? And it gives it the random Z tool name. So we're back to the clown, saving. Always save. You can see I save incrementally, just as a safety default, or even going back, like I mentioned in other videos, back to the original to kind of pull from or use. You never know. So most of this clown, I'm getting the balloon put together, and this is one of the times I think I use folders. Folders come in handy inside of ZBrush, being able to group them together. And then we got easy access to select them. Before you would have to go through, like, I don't know, it was a longer process before you had folders. Now I can just select a set and just move it around. This feature is so helpful. Scaling it up, moving it around, placing it in the scene. And I don't really need to duplicate it in here. I plan to do it in Marmoset, and going back in my mind of what I did and how I did it in Marmoset to duplicate it, I probably could have done it a little cleaner. I just kind of got in a hurry and I wanted to finish, and it got really sloppy really fast. And I don't advise the way I did it, but it's part of learning along the way. Usually when I use Marmoset, it's usually a simple item and they're all attached or something. But for whatever reason, I wanted to test to see how many duplicates I could put in Marmoset, and at the same time I just kind of lost track of where the meshes were. And so after a while, just like, you know what, I can select this cluster of balloons and move them around, because I didn't really think that it would have been too difficult. But there is a little bit about selecting that I found a little difficult. I found it it's a little tricky. So as you can see, the clown, the hat, everything's kind of there. And now it's about time to kind of start getting the pose, to actually pose this character. And going through posing, I usually use the transpose master. And so going back, you can tell that I'm naming parts of the clown. This is something that it's easier if you name it as you go instead of naming it at the very end, because if you name it at the very end, you have to go through each one, and it seems like a longer process than to just do it as you go. So saving again, as the voice in the back of my head saying you should save. And I think what happened was after I did the unwrapping with the hair, it just kind of like said like I need to save every like 5 minutes just to be safe. Even though there is an auto back inside of ZBrush, and it works most of the time, but every now and then it doesn't capture all the stuff if you're moving fairly quickly. So what's going on here is that I'm doing the UV master, and this usually works pretty well for unwrapping very quickly and not really getting too deep into segmenting out your, and you can do polygroups and stuff like that to get a better unwrap. But I found that if you're just trying to get to the end, just quick unwrap, and if it's symmetrical, go ahead and do it. What I think I was trying to do here is that since it was still symmetrical, I didn't want to pose them yet. And then after I do the UVs, I try to pose them, just so that it doesn't confuse the UV master in the end, and try to get a cleaner unwrap. As you saw in that last UV, it was like just a corner of it, and normally I would have broken that up and try to utilize the whole the whole map, but I didn't really need the whole map for this geometry. I just needed I needed the color or whatever to pull over. I didn't really care about the normals and all the other stuff, and I probably apply it anyway, but little items that I know just need a shade of color, I'm not gonna worry about too much about the UVs. For anybody watching like, oh, he just wasted all that real estate in that UV. Yeah, I probably did. But time was knocking on the door, so I just pushing forward. Didn't want to fuss too much about it, and just if it really was an issue once I got into Marmoset, then I would have jumped back into ZBrush and re-exported something new. But that really wasn't the case at the end. I just needed the colors to come through in some of the little details. Part of me wanted to try to use some of the new painting techniques inside of Marmoset, but in this round I just really wanted to go back and forth. There had been a comment previously on another model, like showing a little more detail about the process of cleaning up a model and putting it into Marmoset. This is kind of that process. It's not a clean process right now. This is just a rush process. This is, you grab your model, work on a clone when you use UV Master, because I really wouldn't recommend using the original model just in case it locks up or anything. But using it, work on clone usually helps, and doing your groups, sometimes this helps, using binormals and unwrap. I don't paint often, saying the attractors and stuff inside of the unwrap. Sometimes I'll do it if it's really needed to, like, not put a seam somewhere. And so you can see how crazy the unwrap gets if you don't group it too well. It gets a little interesting. Sometimes just using it as is, no polygroups, and you get something. And again, for speed, I didn't really want to fuss with it. I didn't want to break it out and go with it. I just wanted to keep the creative flow going. And ideally, I just really wanted a basic generic texture on it and call it a day. So each piece, if you're going to carry it into Marmoset, you're going to want to actually like break it down and kind of piece it together, unwrap it, and go from there. It'll help. It just, I guess, kind of planning it out in your head. If you do it often enough, you'll get an idea of what really is. Not too much to it, but if you really want like some broke down if you really want full capability inside of Marmoset, you're going to want to clean up your mesh and do a little bit extra polish to your model. For my use on this little project, I wasn't concerned about that. I just wanted something real loose and kind of free flowing. And putting names, there's the name that really wouldn't have helped me if I put it in Marmoset, like a detail 05. What is that? So quick unwrap, copy paste. So when it works on the clone, you just go back to your original model and select it and paste UVs. And it works really well. Never had an issue with the UV map master, unless you try to do the hair. that's where it kind of comes in an issue. And the face, really quick unwrap. And this is probably, I skip it. I had already tried. I look at it, I'm like, nah. The computer froze too many times on trying to do it. I look at it. Oh, I actually tried to do it here. We tried to unwrap it just to see what happens. I'm really not sure if it was worth it. I escaped, yes. And I got out of it without having to like, oh my god. I think it was just that one more try. I just had to see. It would have sat there for a long time trying to unwrap all those polygons. Really not worth it. I probably could have found a better way. Sometimes when I do a mesh and I need the resolution lower, I would duplicate it, reproject it back down, and that's on the early videos that I kind of clean up the models. That I'll subdivide a remeshed model if I'm using something like Sculptris Pro and going from there. Still renaming. It seems a lot longer because I have to rename, and this is sped up, so in real time it feels a little longer. The little collar, still unwrapping. Trying to make it to the end. So close, like halfway there. The bow tie, and this unwraps pretty well. That one actually, I was like, cool. But it was previously unwrapped, so I didn't really need to worry about it because that was unwrapped for that purpose, to get those UVs on it, to poly paint and stuff like that. I probably should have straightened out those the UVs, but it just, I'm there. I'm at the balloon now. I'm like, I'm almost there. Take off the mask and polygroup the buttons. I think I do. Let's see what it does. Keep the polygroups, I think. Let's see if I click it. It's still masked. I can unmask that. I think it has something to do with the texture. Unwrap it. Came out clean. Sure. Paste. We'll carry on. No looking back. Just running. Just running from time chasing us. The balloon, quick unwrap. I just really wanted a smooth texture, reflective texture inside of Marmoset, so wasn't concerned on that either. So we're at the end of the finish line of unwrapping the clown. Now I need to transpose the clown. So usually I'll do a good save before I move objects. If I'm going to go into a bigger transition, just always save. That way you can go back to your original layout. Unless you do layers, I guess you can save opposing layers. And there's so many different ways in Zbrush to get back some of your information to go back to original. But for this, a save usually works. Going back and looking at the image, I really wanted to, I probably should have painted his lips a little bit more with the shadow and kind of emphasized his lips a little bit more, but for what this is. It's done. I'm going to call this piece done. That was that chapter in time. So using Transpose Master, kind of tilting the head and getting a little bit more character to the piece. I want to say that I did something and I either lost it and I had to repose them again. And so this is like the second time doing it, so I'm a little more hurried of getting it done. So making it not symmetrical. Little things here and there, just break that computerized lookup. When things are too perfect, like I say in other videos, your brain will read it differently, or something will be like it's too perfect. So we just gotta nudge stuff around. Let's move some stuff and break that perfection up a bit. Just pushing and pulling, making stuff a little more unique. And so you can see right here, just trying to angle him a little bit more and then applying that. The other thing is, like, his features are a little more unique. So now is the time to export into Marmoset, and I usually export as an FBX because it works so well on the exporter, because there's also an option in there to say I'm exporting to Marmoset, or I'm exporting to 3D Studio, or some other program listed in there, Maya and some other ones. I'm not sure how different the presets are, but I do know that sometimes exporting out of Zbrush, going to Max, that it's flipped on the, I think it's the U. So if you create a map, you got to go back in and flip the texture before you export it to Max. But using that FBX exporter, it actually just drags it in with it, so it's not too big of a deal. Right here I'm creating the poly paints, and to create the normals and the displacements, you're going to want to, for poly paint, you're going to want to use your highest resolution. For your normals and your displacement, it's going to tell you like, hey, you need to be on your lowest subdivision, because there's nothing to project to this high subdivision. And what it's doing is just projecting the high to the low. And it works out pretty well. I used to have issues with it. I don't know if it was just because I didn't understand it enough, or I just didn't set it up right, or I don't know, who knows. But it works now, and that's all I care about. It doesn't give me too much issue, and it actually works really well for jumping back and forth to like Marmoset or something like that, or 3D Max. Every now and then you'll see a seam, and you'll see it in the UV, and maybe just working with it and trying to do a little different process, and you'll get it right. And so you can see here I'm actually kind of going back in, and I do kind of paint a little bit, but I don't paint enough. There's something that I should have spent a little more time on, and I didn't have much time, so that's where this ended up. I probably should have darkened his eyes just a touch. I do the cap right here. His ears, I thought the hair would have covered it up, or I would have modeled them a little bit better. That's part of that's how it goes. When you're going, you're going. No looking back. So now I'm kind of wondering, like, all right, is this the jump that I need to do to Marmoset? All right, just pose it a little bit more for the jump. And you can see that it's just pushing and pulling little parts here and there. Sometimes a character needs to be posed a little bit before. If you got a lot of clothing and stuff like that, then you'll see that you need to jump to the posing phase a little bit quicker. So there's the texture, displacement create. And these are all default settings. These aren't anything special. Maybe before I would play around with settings, try to get something better, but the defaults work fine for me, for what I need. Every now and then I'll set the export to have the second subdivision instead of the base because there's not enough geometry. But in Marmoset you can actually add subdivisions inside of there now in the newer version. So going around, texture map, poly paint, displacement, rinse and repeat. This is almost kind of want to say the boring part of, you you gotta do each piece and just process it out. Just it's part of the job of doing this to get it out. But after you get it going, you get a little quicker. After you do it like 10 times or 20 times, you're just on autopilot now. Next object, you'll start finding your hotkeys a lot quicker. Start using my arrow keys, and the way I set up Zbrush, my arrow keys go up and down in the subdivision levels, and my left and right arrow keys go up and down on subdivision. So if I really didn't want to look at it, I just push to the right a bunch of times and usually ups the subdivision and go down all the way to the left. There is a tool in there that'll go all highest and all lowest, but these buttons work for me. I don't usually use vector displacement is in there. I haven't really tried to use it inside of Marmoset to see how much difference that creates. And sometimes when I export to Marmoset, I'll need an ambient occlusion pass, and so I'll come back into ZBrush and redo a pass. And there's now the ambient occlusion plugin that does a little bit better job because it calculates all the other objects with it, and you can create an AO pass with that, which is cool. So the balloon I kind of lower to the lower subdivision because I can add subdivisions in Marmoset. And I was wondering if it would help it out on the processing at the end too, to use its own carry its own weight that way. And I wanted to see how many subdivision objects can Marmoset handle, and it handled it pretty well. It actually didn't slow down at all from what I remember. So I exported out as FBX. I kind of skipped that part I think just because I wanted to get in here real quick, and really it was just exporting. Just go to FBX and export and save as with your preferred settings. So now we're in Marmoset, and if you named your objects correctly, the drop down isn't too bad. I usually start out getting my camera fixed. So for this object or this model, I wanted my camera in place so that it wasn't so much of an issue trying to figure out if what I was doing would work. And so I kind of get them locked in, and I had a visual in my mind, balloons everywhere to kind of fill the space to kind of do that, and knowing that I had real-time capabilities of doing depth of field and just the effects that come along with it. I wanted to play with that. I wanted to use the depth of field and push that. I remember back using 3D Max, and before all the real-time stuff, you would do a depth of field and it just took forever. You'd have to see if it worked, and there was a little bit of a headache that went along with it. And with real-time now, there is just instant. You just see it instantly, and it's pretty cool. Fine-tuning the textures inside of Marmoset that came from ZBrush. You can adjust the colors and everything. Mainly the balloon was the one that I kind of started with, the main one. And so now I kind of played with the textures, and now I jump into the scene, trying to get the look and getting your color, because this is going to affect your texturing And getting the environment correct from the start kind of helps to get that little jump on it. I felt like if it's casting a purple or a red tint from the main environment, it's going to affect your texture. So I always kind of wanted to factor that. And I wanted mood. I love using Marmoset and knowing that you can use a mood to do this, that you don't have to worry that it's going to take a long time to render out and see that something's not working to your liking. So that's part of it too. I also feel once you get your mood, you can also create this environment that comes to life as you go. It goes hand in hand. Playing with the hair, I was trying to get the look. I was like, if this hair doesn't work, I'm just gonna have to go back and ZBrush. But I kind of found a straight material to work with the hair. I was gonna use a gradient on there, or I was gonna try to paint it, but as the clock ticked by, I was like, I gotta keep going forward. I looked at all the fun textures that are included with the library. I was wanting to get a little deeper into them, but for what I was wanting, I just wanted a quick piece to put out into the world. Getting the little setup, some of it you gotta actually apply and turn on, like the scattering and subsurface. And I wanted the hair to pick up a little bit of that subsurface scattering. But given that the style was a little cartoonish, I kind of gave it that like fake hair. I didn't want it too realistic. I wanted it to be like that cap, because he's wearing a cap with the little hair put on the side. So I wanted that to read like that cheap kind of Bozo hair, Bozo the Clown. So adjusting here and there. And what's cool about real time is that you can slide these sliders up and down in this instant. You don't have to wait. You don't have to go send it to a farm and render and be like, well, now I gotta wait and come back and see what I got in about 30 minutes or so. Real time is, I don't know, it's a game changer. And if you haven't had a chance, if you're doing 3D and if you haven't had a chance to do real time, there's also like Unreal. Unreal is out there, and you can look at the real time in Unreal Engine. That's free to use. Blender has real time capabilities too. That's another free one. And so just looking around online, I gravitate to Marmoset because I don't know, it's straightforward, it's simple, it has the style that I like in using it in the tools and the result. And I don't know, it just kind of, I was in Marmoset Toolbag 3 and then now I'm in this version 4 and I can't complain. It just got better. So the balloon is in a group. I duplicate the folder, and I probably should have made a group of balloons and duplicated the folder with a group of balloons. But later on, as I find, it gets a little more tricky. I start accidentally parenting some other balloons in a folder and I lost where it was. And the only thing that I didn't really look deep on is there a selection tool inside of the viewport? Because the selection tool would have made a bigger difference. I could just select them all and then drag them around. And the scene drop down hierarchy, it was probably the best way for me to grab everything. But if the balloon got separated from the string in the drop down, then I had to find it in the scene and then kind of put it back together. But in the end, really all I did was just create multiple colors of the balloon, applied them back to the balloons and scattered them out. I kind of speed this process up, and I think I actually kind of skip ahead because it's a long process of just copy paste, and I didn't need to put anybody watching this video through that. It's just more or less scattering balloons in a scene around a crazy looking clown. But I will say this, that this part of the process, on top of doing the, along with the sculpting, this part is fun to me. This is actually kind of like the little topping of the cake. Because I always find out, like, you as you do your models or anything you do, you have your base, your cake is in the oven, and you got the cake, but you could always put your toppings on it. And this is, to me, the little toppings and the details that make your model pop even more. The lighting phase, the set dressing, and all that kind of goes along with it. So I'm starting to duplicate the balloons, but I'm trying to learn that, like, I'm getting a lot of folders, and I'm like, do I want 100 folders? And I start dragging some in other folders, but I'm at the point of no return at one part of the video, and I'm just gonna, like, push forward. I'm like, don't look back, don't look at your mess, just keep going. Adjusting the lighting to kind of match. And I do adjust the balloons one more time, because if you look on the right, the reflectivity is off and the intensity is all the way up. So I kind of pop that at the end too, to kind of give a little bit more balloon reflectiveness. And so you can start seeing the folder structure is getting a little bit more chaotic. It starts out a little more easy here, but as it goes on, the balloons start multiplying and multiplying. And once I get a group of multiple balloons, I'm like, now I can scatter it around. And had I made this a little more straightforward, it would have gone a little bit faster. But we learn as we go, right? There's always a learning process. As if I did this again with balloons, I'll know, or even other objects, I'll be like, well, I learned that the balloon method, I should have put them all in one folder and carried on. But it's okay. That's also part of the fun part, is learning what you can and can't do. I like this in Marmoset, the multiple viewports. I usually don't use them, but since the selection was kind of weird with the balloons, I needed multiple viewports on this. And it worked out, and it's real time, so I can't complain. In 3D Max, I always find myself using one big viewport and jumping back and forth between front and side and left, and I probably would use one viewport in here if there were if I knew the hotkeys to jump back and forth from front, left, and I might need to adjust the hotkeys if it's possible in here. It should be. Most programs you can do hotkeys, or I hope you can do them. Something I need to look into. And as most people, or most times, or even with you watching, you'll find in programs that you do something often enough and you're like, I need a button for that, and you dig around, you're like, oh, I could put a button here, and this is now closer to my needs of not having to drag my hand across a keyboard trying to get to a letter that represents that hotkey. So more and more balloons, and you can start seeing the folder structure. Now I dragged it into another folder, hoping that this would eliminate that need for all the folders, but it starts getting a little I start losing stuff. I clean it up here, but then somewhere between here and there it gets a little more, the balloons get crazy. And this is the part where I say that I jump ahead and carry out the balloon structure. I put them all in one folder, but then I make more folders, and it gets a little harder to grab individual balloons when they're in a group. So like I said, depth of field, real time. It's instant, and it doesn't take very long to get your result. And as I go along more, I'm pushing and pulling the style. I like that you can actually see the bokeh effect with the heart and stuff, or even diamonds or stars, and increase that. I wanted to do the stars, but then it didn't read as well, so I took it off. I probably could have loaded a custom one. That would have been interesting, but going back to the default, it worked fine. See, you see the little stars in the blur effects. And if you're a photographer, that technique actually works on real cameras. If you look online, there's a lot of examples of cutting out a shape and doing a depth of field and going from there. But I love that there's presets, and this kind of gets you a jump start of where you can go with your style. And I did use a preset because I needed to get there faster. I did want a black and white version of the clown. Ooh, this one is where I think I said it. I was like, this is fun. It kind of shifted my direction of style. I was like, this is kind of cotton candy balloons, and so that's where I kind of get that feeling, that happy cotton candy. And the color wheel, you got your blue with your pink, and it's a fun color. Trying to move balloons around, trying to get them into composition. A lot of the composition was kind of fighting me, and I think I actually moved the camera after a while. I'm like, you know what? Or I accidentally moved the camera, and I'm like, oh. I try to get it back in position, and it it's what it is. I probably could have locked the camera, and that issue would have not happened. So the little vignette, a little more darker feeling, a little more creepier clown. Clowns are already kind of creepy looking, but they're so fun to create and draw and do in Zbrush, or any artistic version of a clown is always fun to me. The distortion, just slight, just a touch, just a little bit. I do end up having to. All right, so what happened right here is there's a flare. For some reason the flare gets locked into staying on, so what I have to do is save the scene and reopen Marmoset. This is probably the only time that it kind of like got a little odd. So save your scene, save the scene, and reopen, shut it down, reopen it. Or was it the brightness? I believe it was the brightness. I don't think I reopened it. It was one of my settings. So all these little presets are really neat, and you can save your own presets inside of Marmoset. So yeah, I guess that flare thing was actually just a setting that I didn't adjust. The bloom got kind of kicked up. So that was on my part, not Marmoset. So look at that cloudy feeling, the clown. Get some interesting results really quick, and that's the fun part. If you get a chance to try the trial of Marmoset, it's fun. If you're doing like single objects or just trying to get something real quick with real time, you can't go wrong. So this is nearing the end of my video, and I really hope you learned something from my mistakes or something that I did differently. I try to push through, try to get it done quickly, and this is the end result of pretty much what I end up with. And I appreciate you watching. I hope it was informative. have a good day. Thank you.